Black CEO denied boarding first class until he makes one call and shuts the entire airline down. Greetings, dear viewers. Today we bring you a story bursting with drama, ambition, and redemption. A tale where prejudice meets perseverance. In this narrative, we follow Elijah Kingston, a brilliant Black CEO whose resilience and self-made success story already inspires millions. Yet even he cannot escape the subtle barbs of discrimination when he attempts to board first class on a routine flight. With one bold phone call, Elijah transforms what might have been a fleeting injustice into a tidal wave that rocks an entire airline to its core. But this is no simple story of revenge. It's a riveting quest that peels back corporate secrets and tests the limits of human dignity. Step into a world of intense confrontations, daring investigations, and high-stakes power plays. Prepare yourselves for an unforgettable journey, with twists no one could possibly predict. Before diving into the story, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss the latest stories. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. Elijah Kingston was no stranger to high stakes. As the founder and CEO of Kingston Cyber Dynamics, he had revolutionized the world of online security. From humble beginnings in Chicago's South Side, Elijah had spent late-night hours in public libraries, devouring programming manuals, dreaming of a future where he would stand shoulder to shoulder with the giants of Silicon Valley. Over time, he built a reputation for turning improbable ideas into lucrative ventures, earning him features in Forbes, Bloomberg, and Wired. Now at 42, he was on his way to meet an investor consortium at an international tech conference in San Francisco. Still, his meteoric rise did little to shield him from daily microaggressions. Too often, he'd endure suspicious glances or be mistaken for a personal assistant at board meetings. These experiences had shaped him into someone both painstakingly polite and keenly aware of prejudice, ready to fight back when pushed too far. Today, as he arrived at Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, he had no inkling that his patience and the entire aviation industry would soon be tested in ways he never imagined. In the glossy terminal, passengers buzzed around the American Globe Airways AGA counters. Elijah's assistant, Milo, had booked him a first-class ticket on AGA flight 3421 to San Francisco, so he had every reason to expect a calm, comfortable trip. However, upon approaching the check-in area, he noticed a quizzical stare from a uniformed agent behind the premium desk. Her name tag read Deborah, and she eyed him with the barely concealed skepticism that Elijah knew all too well. "May I help you?" Deborah asked tersely, her gaze flickering to the expensive watch on Elijah's wrist, then to the impeccably tailored suit he wore. Elijah offered a polite nod. "Yes, I'm here to check in for first class on flight 3421. Deborah's brow furrowed. She took his ID, as though it might be fraudulent, then typed rapidly into her computer. The tension was palpable, especially as the line behind him grew longer. Elijah sensed the shift in tone, whatever protocol this agent was about to enforce. He had a sinking feeling it would be far from standard. Deborah pursed her lips. "I'm not seeing your booking in the system, Mr. Kingston," she said loudly, as though the entire waiting area needed to hear. Another agent nearby glanced over, curious. Elijah calmly produced the digital boarding pass on his phone. "I have a confirmation number, see?" He pointed to the screen, where the itinerary clearly displayed the flight details and the seat assignment too. A, in first class. Deborah glanced at it, then at her screen again. "I'm afraid we'll need a manager to verify this. There might be a glitch." She didn't bother to lower her voice, causing a ripple of murmurs in the line behind him. Elijah noticed people craning their necks, some with empathy and others with the usual suspicion. He felt the heat rise in his chest. It wasn't the first time he'd been singled out under flimsy pretenses, but this was especially blatant. Before he could protest, Deborah stepped away to summon a supervisor, leaving Elijah stranded at the counter, as though he were some kind of con artist. While Deborah was gone, Elijah fielded text messages from Milo, who was already at the conference venue prepping for his arrival. Milo asked if everything was smooth, Elijah typed back a quick issue at check-in, might be a delay. Just then, the manager appeared, a tall, graying man named Russell. He scanned Elijah's ID and the phone screen, frowned, and tapped a few keys on the terminal. A hush seemed to descend over the immediate area. Elijah could almost sense the conclusion. Either Russell would apologize and finalize the check-in, or this situation would escalate. To his dismay, Russell's expression darkened. "Sir, it seems there's a concern about how this ticket was purchased. Are you absolutely sure your corporate card was charged?" The insinuation of fraud made Elijah's jaw tighten. He forced himself to speak calmly. "Yes, absolutely. My finance department booked it. We have the transaction record." The manager exchanged a look with Deborah, who smirked slightly. Elijah felt a swirl of anger and embarrassment. He'd built multi-million-dollar cybersecurity systems, consulted for Fortune 500 companies, and was recognized by name on stages worldwide, yet here, in one of the busiest airports in America, he was being reduced to a suspect. Eventually, Russell half muttered, "We'll sort this out. Follow me." He led Elijah away from the main counter toward a side office with frosted glass walls. Onlookers stared, and some even snapped photos or filmed with their phones. Inside that small office, the manager explained that they had flagged his reservation for possible irregularities because there had been an influx of stolen corporate credit cards used to book premium tickets. Elijah's frustration simmered. "I understand being cautious, but this is overkill. You could have verified my ID against your system in 2 minutes." Russell offered no apology. Instead, he tapped on a tablet, scanning Elijah's driver's license under a special reader. Elijah's mind raced. Was this standard procedure? Probably not. But he knew losing his temper wouldn't help. "All right, Mr. Kingston," Russell finally said, somewhat begrudgingly. "Everything checks out. My apologies, but it's better to be safe than sorry." He gestured for Elijah to leave. Just as Elijah reached the door, Russell mumbled something about how these kinds of mix-ups happen often, but Elijah could read the subtext. This wasn't a genuine mistake. It was a microaggression stretched to its limit. Still reeling from the incident, Elijah resumed his place at the check-in counter, collecting his boarding pass from Deborah. Her tone dripped with disapproval. "Gate 29. Boarding in 30 minutes. Enjoy your flight." There was no sincerity in her words. Elijah forced a polite nod, resisting the urge to call her out on her behavior. As he walked away, he overheard another passenger remark, "See, he just wants attention." Elijah swallowed a retort, deciding that dealing with the airline staff was more than enough for one day. Making his way to security, he realized time was tight. He had only 20 minutes before the gate closed. The entire fiasco had cost him precious time, and his stress levels soared. The security line was predictably long, but as a first-class passenger, he had access to the priority lane. Yet when he approached the TSA checkpoint, the agent looked at his boarding pass and signaled to a colleague. "He's a random selection for additional screening," the agent declared, ignoring Elijah's rightful place in the expedited line. Elijah felt a cold rush of disbelief. Another random check. Just minutes after that humiliating interrogation at the check-in counter. His carry-on was emptied, each pocket and pouch scrutinized as onlookers passed by. A pair of TSA officers swabbed every electronic item for chemical traces. Elijah complied, but he couldn't ignore how each new indignity stacked up, sending a clear message, "You don't belong here." By the time they finished, the final boarding call for flight 3421 was echoing through the terminal. Elijah sprinted toward gate 29, struggling to rezip his carry-on, his heart thumping with adrenaline. When he arrived at the gate, 2 uniformed AGA employees were about to close the door. "Wait," Elijah called out, breathing heavily. They turned, one of them scowling. "You, Kingston?" he asked. Elijah nodded. "We were told we might have one last passenger." The man hesitated, then scanned Elijah's boarding pass. A beep of acceptance sounded, and the door reopened. Elijah exhaled relief, stepping into the jet bridge with a swirl of gratitude and residual anger. Little did he know that this was only the beginning of a far more elaborate ordeal. Inside the Boeing 777, the business and first-class sections were separated by a gleaming partition. Passengers were already seated, the overhead bins mostly filled. Elijah hurried toward seat 2A, a window seat with extra legroom. Adjusting his tie and trying to steady his breathing, he felt every eye on him, or so it seemed, as though the entire cabin sensed some kind of commotion had trailed him. A flight attendant named Helen offered a coldly polite smile and asked if she could stow his jacket. Elijah handed it over, sinking into the plush seat. Moments later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing a slight delay due to last-minute checks. Elijah couldn't help but wonder if he was the cause. He glanced toward the front of the cabin and saw Deborah, the same check-in agent, now standing near the cockpit with a clipboard in her hand. Their eyes met momentarily, and a chill raced down his spine. What was she doing on board? Before he could dwell on it, the safety demonstration began. Outside the window, the Texas sun glared over the tarmac, but inside, Elijah felt a cloud of tension gathering overhead. It wasn't until the plane was taxiing that Elijah finally let out a shaky breath, thinking that the worst was behind him. He adjusted the seat controls and opened the in-flight magazine to distract himself. His phone was in airplane mode, but he saw notifications piling up from Milo. Something about urgent calls and potential sabotage. Sabotage? Elijah's mind spun. Was Milo being overly dramatic, or was there an actual threat looming? He couldn't check the messages yet. For the next 3 hours, he would be isolated from the world, stuck in a steel tube at 35,000 feet. Then Helen, the flight attendant, returned and placed a small envelope on Elijah's tray table. "This arrived for you," she said, her voice wary. Elijah frowned, glancing at the envelope. Inside was a single note: "Stay seated and stay quiet. We're watching you." His heart lurched, and all notions of a routine flight vanished. Who was we, and what did they want? Could it be Deborah behind this, or someone else entirely? The sense of being cornered intensified, and Elijah realized he was far from safe, even in first class. As the plane soared into the skies, Elijah felt an undercurrent of dread that replaced the usual hum of excitement he felt while traveling. Dinner service began in first-class seared salmon, roasted vegetables, a choice of wine, but his appetite vanished. Instead, he carefully folded the note and slid it into his briefcase. He didn't want to alert the flight crew or cause panic, not without a clearer understanding of what was happening. Trying to appear calm, he leaned back and pretended to skim over a business report on his tablet, but his eyes kept darting around, searching for anyone who might be watching him too closely. Deborah was in conversation with another attendant by the galley, occasionally glancing his way. Could she be part of some twisted scheme, or was she just upholding her role? Elijah's thoughts buzzed. Suddenly, a sharp jolt rocked the plane, followed by turbulence that made glasses clink loudly. The passengers gasped, and the captain's voice insisted it was nothing more than light chop. Yet Elijah's heart pounded with the suspicion that turbulence was the least of his worries. Half an hour later, Elijah tried to steady his nerves by focusing on his upcoming presentation. But when he reached for his carry-on to retrieve a file, he discovered it wasn't in the overhead bin where he'd placed it. Alarm shot through him. He got up, scanning the cabin. Could someone have moved it? Another flight attendant insisted she hadn't touched any passenger belongings. Elijah navigated the narrow aisle, peeking into overhead compartments. Nothing. A sense of violation and panic rose. His carry-on contained his personal laptop, crucial documents for the conference, and even prototypes for a new cybersecurity algorithm. With sinking realization, Elijah concluded that the bag was gone, not just misplaced. Who could have taken it? In first class, each seat was assigned, the passengers known. Could it have been stowed elsewhere by accident? Or was it more sinister? The note in the envelope replayed in his mind, "We're watching you." Suddenly, a swirl of conspiracy took shape. This wasn't just petty harassment, someone was orchestrating a bigger game. Despite the uneasy atmosphere, the flight pressed on. Elijah returned to his seat, feeling helpless. By now, Deborah was nowhere to be seen, and Helen, the only flight attendant who seemed partially approachable, was busy serving drinks. Elijah took a leap of faith. He caught Helen's eye and motioned her over quietly. "My carry-on is missing," he said, keeping his voice low. "It had some valuable items." Helen's brow furrowed with genuine concern. "That's very odd." Let me check with the rest of the crew. She disappeared down the aisle. While Elijah waited, anxiety gnawed at him. What if the stolen items were used against him or his company? The prototypes on that laptop could be worth millions in the wrong hands, not to mention the sensitive corporate data. His phone was safe in his pocket, but it was in airplane mode, and there was no immediate way to alert Milo or anyone else on the ground. Each passing minute felt like stepping deeper into a labyrinth of calculated moves by an unseen opponent. Helen returned, but her expression was tense. No one has seen your bag. I'm so sorry, Mr. Kingston. The captain has been informed, and will do a thorough check once we land. Elijah's frustration flared. That's not good enough. There's something more going on here. He briefly explained the suspicious note, but Helen's eyes went wide with alarm. She leaned in and whispered, Please, be careful. I don't know who could be behind this, but maybe you should keep your head down for the rest of the flight. Keeping his head down was the last thing Elijah wanted to do. However, he was trapped in a plane with limited options. He decided to remain vigilant and see if any further clues arose. About an hour into the flight, while the cabin lights were dimmed, Elijah noticed someone slip into the galley and place a small envelope in a trash receptacle. The figure was partially obscured, but the posture looked vaguely familiar. Could it be Deborah? Curiosity overrode caution. Once the figure disappeared, Elijah stealthily approached the galley. He rummaged through the trash, ignoring the revulsion of sifting through discarded napkins and plastic cups. Sure enough, there was an envelope identical in style to the one delivered to him. With trembling fingers, he opened it. A single line scrawled on the same stationery read, Mission in progress. Bag secured. Elijah's mouth went dry. Who was receiving these messages? Were they working as a team, orchestrating each step with chilling precision? Deciding it was time to take action, Elijah quietly slipped the note into his jacket pocket. He would confront Deborah, but only once he had a safer vantage. If she truly was part of something nefarious, cornering her mid-flight could escalate the danger for everyone aboard. He stepped back to his seat, adrenaline coursing, mind whirring with plans for how to expose this scheme. When the plane finally began its descent into San Francisco, Elijah felt relief, overshadowed by foreboding. He'd lost a critical carry-on bag, discovered ominous notes, and was left with more questions than answers. As soon as the seatbelt sign was off, he rose quickly, determined to exit before Deborah could vanish. To his surprise, Deborah was greeting passengers at the exit, smiling in a forced, mechanical way. When Elijah approached, her gaze momentarily hardened. "Thank you for flying with Aga," she said, the words coldly professional. Elijah forced an equally polite tone. "I believe we have some unfinished business, Deborah." She blinked, feigning ignorance. "I'm not sure what you mean, Mr. Kingston." He offered a tight smile. "You will soon." Without another word, he walked up the jet bridge, heart pounding, vowing to uncover the truth. Outside, the hustle of arrivals provided a stark contrast to the tense microcosm aboard the flight. People hurried to baggage claim, while Elijah stood momentarily frozen. His phone buzzed relentlessly, no doubt with messages from Milo and possibly from unknown numbers. He braced himself for the chaos that awaited. The first message he read was from Milo. "Where are you?" Some rumor swirling about a stolen identity. Also, "Your bank just froze the corporate card." Elijah's pulse quickened. A stolen identity? Had the infiltrators used the data in his bag to impersonate him or hack into Kingston's cyberdynamic systems? He needed to check in with the bank. But just as he was about to call, another text flashed from an unknown number. "You've lost more than a bag. If you want your secrets kept, cooperate." Elijah fought a wave of nausea. This was blackmail, plain and simple. They had stolen data that might compromise both his personal life and his company's future. In the middle of an airport arrivals concourse, he found a quiet corner and dialed his bank, verifying that indeed suspicious charges had attempted to clear on the corporate card. Then he called his chief security officer, a sharp-minded woman named Lenora, instructing her to initiate a full network lockdown and security protocol. The game had escalated faster than he feared. Before heading to the conference, Elijah visited the airline's baggage claim office to report his missing carry-on. A harried agent named Bryce typed up a report but seemed disinterested. You can fill out the online form as well, he droned. We'll get back to you if we find it. Elijah clenched his jaw. This isn't just lost luggage, it's theft, possibly an inside job. Bryce arched an eyebrow. Inside job? We handle thousands of bags a day, sir. Sometimes they go missing, but let's not jump to conspiracy theories. Elijah noticed a flicker of nervousness behind Bryce's indifference. Was Bryce simply worn out from dealing with disgruntled passengers, or was there something more? Can I speak to the station manager? Elijah pressed. Bryce's demeanor wavered. He's busy, sir. I can have him call you. Elijah left his contact details and stepped away, deciding it was time to approach the authorities. Yet something told him that local airport police might brush this off as well. He needed bigger guns, someone with enough influence to rattle a major airline's chain of command, and he knew exactly who to call. Riding in a black SUV sent by the conference organizers, Elijah dialed a longtime friend, Congresswoman Regina Powers, a bold representative who fought relentlessly for consumer protection. Over the years, she'd spearheaded investigations into corporate malfeasance, including hidden baggage fees and airline industry monopolies. He explained the bizarre series of events, the suspicious check and fiasco, the menacing notes, the missing bag containing critical data, and the blackmail attempt. Regina was alarmed. Elijah, this isn't just a case of racism or petty theft. It sounds like corporate espionage, maybe even infiltration by a competitor. I'll make some calls to the FAA and the Department of Transportation. We'll see if we can get some immediate attention on this. Elijah felt a weight lift. At least one ally was ready to stand by him, but he still had no idea how deep the conspiracy went. Glancing out the window, he watched the skyline of San Francisco approach, the Golden Gate Bridge faint in the distance. He felt a twinge of regret that his usual excitement about visiting this tech haven was overshadowed by dread. Upon arriving at the luxurious Grand Meridian Hotel, Elijah was greeted by Milo, who looked as though he hadn't slept. The rumor mill is going crazy, Milo said in a hushed voice. Some gossip that you used a stolen corporate card for your flight, and apparently AGA is investigating you for fraudulent activity. Meanwhile, the investor group is anxious. They heard chatter that your new prototype is compromised. Elijah pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to push back the throbbing headache. We're dealing with a well-orchestrated smear campaign. Someone on the inside at AGA is either colluding with an outside entity or playing their own game. Milo handed him a file. Here's what our cybersecurity team found. The attempts to hack our systems came from an IP address connected to an airline office in Dallas. It's almost too obvious, Elijah grimaced. They want us to know it's them. This is intimidation. He realized that forging forward with the conference presentation was vital. Canceling would signal weakness and hand a victory to whoever orchestrated this. But first, they needed to ensure no further sabotage was possible. That evening, Elijah and Milo convened an emergency meeting with Lenora and the rest of the security team via video conference. Screens flickered in the plush hotel suite as Lenora presented her findings. They accessed some design files, but everything is encrypted with top-tier protocols. However, if they manage to force you into paying ransom, they might leak partial data to tarnish your reputation. Elijah exhaled slowly, feeling a swirl of anger and frustration. We never pay ransom. That's our policy. But we do need a plan to counter whatever narrative they're pushing. Lenora nodded. Congresswoman Powers has already reached out to the Department of Transportation's Office of Aviation Consumer Protection. They're requesting a formal complaint from you, Elijah. A flicker of determination sparked in his eyes. Good. Let them try to bury me. We'll see how they handle a government investigation. Determined to maintain composure, Elijah ended the call with a vow to fight back. Early the next morning, Elijah made his way to the tech conference venue, a sprawling convention center in downtown San Francisco. The air buzzed with excitement. Startups pitched to venture capitalists, while established giants like Google, Microsoft, and Cisco showcased new prototypes. Elijah's keynote was scheduled for midday, focusing on the future of global cybersecurity. As he walked into the green room backstage, he sensed tension from his peers. Some shot him sympathetic glances, while others looked wary, as though scandal had already consumed him. Milo approached with a worried expression. Aga just released a statement that they're conducting an internal review of a suspicious passenger who might have boarded with fraudulent credentials. They haven't named you, but social media is ablaze with speculation. Elijah inhaled, calming his frustration. They want to discredit me before I take the stage. Fine, let them. But it still stung. He had worked years to gain legitimacy in an industry that sometimes undervalued minority entrepreneurs. Now an entire airline was casting him as a criminal. The keynote hall filled quickly. Thousands of attendees packed the seats, with cameras aimed at the stage. When Elijah stepped into the spotlight, applause erupted, albeit tinged with curiosity about the rumors swirling around him. Taking the podium, he began his presentation on quantum encryption and the new frontier of data protection. His voice was firm, unwavering, each slide a testament to the cutting-edge research his company spearheaded. For a brief, exhilarating moment, the drama with Aga faded. He was once again the pioneering mind admired for pushing the boundaries of cybersecurity. Then, just as he finished explaining a complex algorithm, a man in a black suit approached from offstage, whispering urgently to Milo. The expression on Milo's face was grim as he leaned into Elijah. "They're here, AGA's legal representatives. They have a court order to seize any relevant data you might present." Shock rippled through Elijah. On stage, the audience sensed the sudden shift in atmosphere. Some looked at one another, puzzled. To them, it seemed like a random interruption, but to Elijah, it was a brazen move of intimidation, an attempt to forcibly halt his demonstration and brand him a thief or fraudster. Summoning all his poise, Elijah cleared his throat and addressed the crowd. "I've just been informed that American Globe Airways is attempting to disrupt my presentation. They claim I have fraudulently obtained data. Let me be clear, these accusations are baseless. My company's work stands on its own merit, and I have nothing to hide." A murmur swept through the audience, a mixture of shock and support. Cameras flashed, capturing Elijah's calm demeanor in the face of adversity. AGA's legal team, flanked by two men wearing official-looking badges, appeared at the side of the stage. One stepped forward, holding paperwork. "Mr. Kingston, we have reason to believe you are in possession of stolen or compromised data related to airline operations. We must inspect any devices you have here." An outraged gasp filled the auditorium. Elijah refused to be cowed. "I welcome a fair investigation, but I will not be subjected to bullying in front of an international audience." The tension felt electric. In the front row, half a dozen reporters were already frantically typing or live tweeting the unfolding drama. Behind the scenes, security guards for the convention scrambled to figure out how to handle this intrusion. The event's organizers rushed to the stage, trying to keep the confrontation from descending into chaos. Knowing that any sign of fear might unravel his credibility, Elijah turned to the AGA representative. "You want my data? Then follow proper legal channels. I've already contacted the FAA and the DOT regarding your airline's misconduct. Perhaps we should let the authorities decide who's truly in the wrong." The AGA lawyers exchanged glances. The presence of so many cameras clearly made them uneasy. "We'll be filing a formal complaint," one of them snapped. "This isn't over." Elijah stood his ground, maintaining eye contact. "No, it isn't." A volley of questions erupted from the audience, journalists clamoring for details. Seizing the moment, Elijah said, "I promise you, everything will come to light. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a keynote to finish." The audience roared in approval, and the lawyers beat a hasty retreat, effectively embarrassed on a global stage. Later that afternoon, media outlets buzzed with headlines: "Tech Titan versus Airline Giant, Live Confrontation at Security Summit." Hashtags like hashtag AGA Controversy and hashtag Stand With Elijah trended on Twitter. Calls from potential allies and outraged citizens flooded Kingston's cyber dynamics switchboard. Yet Elijah knew that social media solidarity was only a piece of the puzzle. He needed real legal leverage to protect his company and stop AGA's harassment. He huddled with his team, discussing a multi-pronged approach: suing the airline for defamation, cooperating with federal authorities, to investigate potential collusion within the company and continuing to expose any wrongdoing. Congresswoman Powers had already arranged a meeting with the Undersecretary of the Department of Transportation to expedite the probe. Watching the flurry of planning around him, Elijah felt a pang of guilt. Thousands of AGA employees could suffer if the airline faced severe fines or closures. He didn't want to harm innocent workers, but the rot needed to be excised. That evening, Elijah checked into his hotel suite and found a small, unmarked envelope slid under the door. He froze, recalling the menacing notes from the flight. Carefully, he opened it. "Stop your crusade or face consequences. We have your data, and we can twist it any way we want." A chill rippled through him. He snapped photos of the note and forwarded them to Lenora, who quickly confirmed that it matched the style of the in-flight message. Clearly, the orchestrators of this scheme were doubling down. Instead of recoiling, Elijah steeled his resolve. He contacted the hotel's security to review CCTV footage of the floor. If the messenger had been caught on camera, it might lead to a solid clue. As the night wore on, his phone buzzed. Regina Powers was on the line. "I've got the wheels turning in Washington," she said. "High-level people at the FAA are furious about an airline targeting a passenger this way. Trust me, they don't want another scandal after recent PR nightmares in the industry." Elijah thanked her, realizing how crucial her support was. Then he lay awake, thinking about the next move, a direct confrontation with AGA's top brass. The following morning, an extraordinary email arrived in Elijah's inbox, an invitation from AGA's CEO, Rutherford Hayes, requesting a private meeting at AGA's corporate office in San Francisco. The message was cordial, claiming a desire to clear misunderstandings and find an amicable resolution. Elijah snorted. It was likely a trap, or at best, a ploy to gauge his next steps. Milo and Lenora urged caution. "Don't go alone," Milo insisted. "They might just want to intimidate you in person." Yet Elijah saw an opportunity. If Hayes was spooked by the government inquiry, he might be willing to reveal the hidden players behind these attacks. So Elijah accepted, specifying that he would bring legal counsel. The appointment was set for that afternoon at AGA's sleek high-rise near the Embarcadero. As Elijah closed his laptop, he felt a tinge of anticipation. He was about to confront the leadership of the airline that had, intentionally or not, launched a campaign of sabotage against him. AGA's local headquarters occupied the top floors of a reflective skyscraper. It had a breathtaking view of the bay and a security checkpoint that rivaled airport screening. Elijah and Harriet James, his attorney, passed through an ID scan, then stepped into a hushed lobby decorated with abstract art and tasteful lighting. A severe-looking receptionist guided them to a plush waiting area. Within minutes, Rutherford Hayes appeared, a tall, silver-haired executive wearing a forced smile. "Elijah, thank you for coming," he said, extending a handshake. "I trust we can settle this unfortunate misunderstanding quickly." Elijah's expression remained guarded. "I hope so." Hayes led them into a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. A large painting of an airplane soared across a stormy sky on one wall, ironically echoing the turmoil Elijah had faced. Harriet sat down, pen and notepad at the ready, every bit the consummate professional. Hayes cleared his throat. "First, allow me to express regret for the inconvenience you experienced. We aim to provide top-notch service to all our passengers. If any staff behavior was inappropriate, we will address it internally." Elijah interjected. "With respect, Mr. Hayes, this is far more than inappropriate behavior. My personal data was stolen, and malicious rumors were spread by your company. There are official investigations looming. I want the truth. Who orchestrated this campaign, and why?" Hayes offered a patronizing smile. "I can assure you, if there's any wrongdoing, it's not sanctioned by the executive team. Our airline has seen a surge in fraud attempts, and our staff may have overreacted. Let's not jump to conspiracy theories." Harriet leaned forward. "We have evidence, including blackmail notes and suspicious internal IP addresses linked to AGA. We'll be handing this over to federal authorities." Hayes's face twitched. "Surely we can find a more private solution. Lawsuits and public spectacles harm both parties." Elijah locked eyes with Hayes. "I'm not here to protect your brand. Someone in AGA threatened me, stole from me, and tried to sabotage my reputation on an international stage. I won't rest until I know who is responsible. Hayes sighed theatrically. Well, we're willing to compensate you, within reason, for any lost items or reputational damage. Let's be pragmatic. Harriet's jaw tightened. You can't buy off the official investigations. The Department of Transportation, the FAA, and possibly the FBI will be involved, given the digital espionage element. A flicker of panic crossed Hayes's gaze. FBI? That seems excessive. Elijah leaned forward. Only if it's a matter of national security. Cyber breaches often fall under their purview. Now, are you going to cooperate, or will you continue stalling? Hayes paused, then pressed a button on his desk. I'll have our chief compliance officer join us. Elijah sensed that Hayes was reluctantly cornered, so he sat back, waiting for the next move. This amicable resolution was shaping up to be anything but simple. A few moments later, a woman with meticulously styled hair and sharp features strode in, introduced as Clarissa Holt, AGA's chief compliance officer. She bore the confident air of someone used to putting out fires. She shook hands quickly, then took a seat. I've been briefed on this situation. We take these accusations seriously. We'd like to review any evidence you have that links AGA to these alleged acts. Elijah handed over printed screenshots of the suspicious IP addresses, the notes and timestamps that tied them to AGA systems. Clarissa studied them, her face impassive. We'll conduct internal audit immediately. This is highly irregular. Harriet folded her arms. We require a thorough chain of custody report on who had access to these networks. Clarissa nodded. I'll do what I can, but it may take time. Our data is complex, and thousands of employees have varying permissions. Hayes chimed in. While Clarissa handles the internal side, let's talk about how we can ensure your cooperation, Mr. Kingston. Perhaps we can settle this matter quietly, avoiding negative publicity. Elijah's jaw clenched. You think I'm here for hush money? You still don't get it. I want the truth to come out publicly. The tension in the room thickened. Hayes stood, forcing a polite smile. We'll do our best to deliver that truth. And we'll be in touch. It was a clear, if subtle, dismissal. As Elijah and Harriet left, Harriet whispered, They're playing for time. Expect more roadblocks. Elijah nodded, stepping into the elevator. A swirl of pent-up energy burned inside him. This wasn't the end, it was the opening salvo. Once in the lobby, he called Regina Powers, updating her on the meeting. She said, I'll push the dot to expedite. Keep pressing. Once they sense the feds breathing down their neck, we'll see who cracks first. Walking out onto the bustling sidewalk, Elijah realized that his personal crusade was morphing into a large-scale confrontation. Dozens of employees at AGA might be innocent, but a faction within the airline was targeting him. He resolved that no matter how complicated it got, he would expose them. His phone buzzed again, another unknown number. This time the text read, You walked into the lion's den. Next step will be your downfall if you continue. Elijah stared at it, a wave of defiance coursing through him. He typed back, Try me. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit server room at AGA's Dallas headquarters, a man wearing an employee badge labeled it Specialist hammered away at a keyboard. Lines of code scrolled across multiple monitors. One screen displayed Elijah's personal data, including scanned passports, financial statements, and internal project briefs. Another showed chat logs with anonymous handles, each exchanging cryptic instructions. A third screen flashed with attempts to bypass the encryption on the Kingston prototypes. This was the unseen heart of the conspiracy, a secret cell within AGA, possibly with external backers, aiming to exploit or ruin Elijah Kingston. A phone on the desk buzzed. The IT specialist glanced down at the message. CEO meeting with Kingston. Accelerate. Phase 2. More pressure needed. Nodding, he typed furiously, initiating a Trojan horse attack on a domain that belonged to Kingston Cyber Dynamics. The plan? Launch a false flag infiltration that would appear as though Elijah's company had hacked AGA's systems. If successful, it would flip the blame script entirely. Elijah returned to the Grand Meridian Hotel to find Milo pale with alarm. We just detected unauthorized login attempts at our main database. They're trying to mask the IP, but we caught fragments that lead back to an airline server. Elijah's face hardened. Aga is doubling down, trying to frame us. He dialed Lenora, who confirmed the infiltration attempt. We've got them on partial trace. They're using sophisticated false flag techniques, but it's sloppy. That gave Elijah a surge of hope. His team's advanced cybersecurity might capture evidence strong enough to prove that Aga was behind these attacks. With each new escalation, the stakes grew. A single slip could tarnish Elijah's brand or even lead to criminal charges if the sabotage was effective enough. However, the attackers underestimated the resiliency of a man who built a cybersecurity empire from the ground up. The hour drew late, but Elijah felt the urgency pounding in his veins. "Gather everything we have," he told Milo. "Then we go to the authorities." Morning dawned on a day that would forever alter the airline industry. Elijah woke to frantic messages. Major news outlets were running stories about potential corporate espionage at AGA, referencing insider sources. Speculation abounded that the airline was under federal scrutiny for discriminatory practices and high-level hacking attempts. Stock prices for AGA began to wobble. On social media, outraged consumers vowed to boycott the airline, using hashtags like #BoycottAGAGA and #JusticeForElijah. Elijah felt a flicker of guilt about the potential fallout, but he also recognized that bringing bigotry and criminal conspiracies to light was the only way to cleanse them. Meanwhile, Regina Powers called with an update. The DOT's complaint line has been overwhelmed with calls from passengers claiming they also face discrimination at AGA. This is snowballing fast. The FAA is investigating compliance shortfalls. You've lit a fire, Elijah. Eager to finalize the evidence, Elijah and his team booked an emergency meeting with an FBI field office in San Francisco. They carried an encrypted drive containing logs of hacking attempts, internal IP addresses, and digital footprints that trace the infiltration back to AGA's infrastructure. Two special agents, Williams and Hernandez, listened intently as Harriet and Lenora presented the case. The agents exchanged glances, clearly intrigued by the scope. "If even half of this is accurate," Agent Williams said, "we're dealing with serious cybercrimes. This goes beyond typical corporate rivalry." Agent Hernandez added, "We'll coordinate with the Department of Justice, but we'll need you to keep this confidential for now. We don't want to tip off potential suspects." Elijah's nod was grim. The last thing he wanted was to warn the conspirators, but his priority was to protect his company and bring accountability. As he left the FBI office, a wave of relief mixed with dread washed over him. They were dealing with serious criminals, and the deeper the feds dug, the riskier it became. Meanwhile, AGA's public relations team scrambled to stem the bleeding. Press releases denied any official wrongdoing and framed Elijah's allegations as unsubstantiated claims. However, multiple employees stepped forward under anonymity, confirming unusual directives to scrutinize certain passengers more intensively, particularly those who didn't fit the profile of a typical first-class traveler. Old, unresolved complaints about racial bias at check encounters resurfaced. The media narrative flipped from focusing on Elijah's specific saga to a broader condemnation of institutional prejudice within the airline. Elijah monitored this media storm warily. He didn't want the public to lose sight of the active sabotage and data theft. While discrimination was indeed part of the story, a meticulously orchestrated hacking scheme was also at play. "We need to keep pushing the espionage angle," he told Harriet. "The world needs to see the full picture." Harriet agreed, drafting a statement that carefully connected the discriminatory environment to the possibility that rogue individuals inside AGA felt emboldened to commit outright crimes. Under mounting pressure, Rutherford Hayes attempted damage control. He held a live-streamed press conference, standing before AGA's logo. Looking tense but trying to exude confidence, he said, "We acknowledge concerns raised by Mr. Kingston. AGA has zero tolerance for discrimination or illegal activities. We are fully cooperating with the authorities." However, journalists were relentless, firing pointed questions about Deborah, the missing bag, and rumors of an internal conspiracy. Hayes stumbled through vague denials, offering no concrete proof of innocence. Suddenly, a whistleblower's recorded testimony leaked online, featuring a distorted voice identifying themselves as an AGA employee. They allege that certain staff in the IT and security departments had explicit instructions to target high-profile minority passengers for enhanced scrutiny. The leaked audio mentioned a plan to either discredit or extort powerful individuals. In the eyes of the public, that sealed AGA's fate. The airline looked corrupt at best, criminal at worst. In the face of these damning revelations, the FBI escalated its probe. Agents raided AGA offices in Dallas and San Francisco, seizing servers and documents. A swirling maelstrom of legal action ensued: civil suits for discrimination, federal investigations into cyber espionage, and public outrage over the airline's crumbling credibility. As stock values plummeted, shareholders demanded resignations from the top. Rutherford Hayes, Clarissa Holt, and other executives found themselves under intense scrutiny. Staff morale hit rock bottom. Elijah watched the news coverage from a vantage point of mixed relief and sadness. People kept congratulating him for taking down a crooked airline, but he took no pleasure in the fallout for innocent employees. He was never out for revenge. His singular goal had been justice and prevention of further harm. Now the entire airline tottered on the brink of collapse. Meanwhile, Deborah, whose last name turned out to be Deborah Lannister, was identified in leaked emails that showed she had personally flagged Elijah for special screening the day of his flight. Another staffer claimed Deborah was well connected to the clandestine group inside AGA. When confronted, Deborah insisted she was merely following orders and was unaware of the grander scheme. Yet evidence suggested she was deeply involved, including surveillance of Elijah's movements in first class and instructions to confiscate his carry-on under false pretenses. In a surprising twist, Clarissa Holt, the chief compliance officer, was caught sending encrypted messages to the shadowy IT specialist in Dallas. She was effectively facilitating the hacking attempts while publicly vowing to investigate them. A single decrypted memo read: "Keep pushing. We need Kingston to fold or pay up." This was the smoking gun that tied corporate leadership to the sabotage. Within hours of this leak, Clarissa was placed on leave, pending a criminal investigation. In an extraordinary move, the Department of Transportation announced an emergency hearing on AGA's operating license. Airline representatives tried to argue that a few bad actors were responsible, but the scope of corruption looked systemic. Passengers from across the country recounted horror stories: denial of boarding passes, unwarranted baggage fees, racial profiling. Pilots and flight attendants spoke of intense workplace harassment and hush policies. The airline's meltdown was unfolding publicly, day by day, as an example of hubris and moral bankruptcy. Elijah, though exhausted, felt a measure of vindication. His attorneys prepared him to testify at the DOT hearing. This was about more than Elijah's personal ordeal. It was about speaking for countless passengers and employees who had been voiceless. For a moment, he reflected on his younger days. How many times had he been dismissed or demeaned? Now he had the platform to spark real change. When Elijah took the stand, the room was packed with journalists, officials, and an online audience of millions. The tension was tangible. With quiet conviction, he recounted each step of the ordeal, from the humiliating check-in to the stolen data, the blackmail notes, and the brazen infiltration attempts. He submitted evidence of collusion, referencing FBI findings. In unwavering tones, he said, "This isn't about my seat in first class. It's about a culture that empowered individuals to discriminate and commit cybercrimes for profit. That culture must end." AGA's lawyers tried to undermine his credibility, implying that Elijah was orchestrating a publicity stunt. But their accusations fizzled under the weight of the FBI's growing evidence. By the end of his testimony, the audience erupted in supportive applause, rare in such a formal setting. Clearly, the tide was against AGA. Shortly after, the DOT issued a preliminary ruling: AGA's operations would be severely restricted, pending a deeper audit of their practices. Flight cancellations soared, and travelers scrambled to rebook on rival airlines. Stock in AGA plunged to record lows, threatening the company with bankruptcy. Observers were stunned by how swiftly a once major airline had collapsed under scandal. But for those who had suffered at the hands of AGA's corrupt or prejudiced employees, it felt like long-awaited justice. Elijah was inundated with interview requests, but he chose to keep a relatively low profile, letting the official investigations speak for themselves. The best outcome, he told Milo, would be for the airline to rebuild from scratch with ethical leadership, or for the market to replace them with companies that treat everyone fairly. Still, the aftermath was bittersweet. Thousands of innocent employees faced uncertainty, and air travel options diminished in certain regions. Yet a powerful message had been sent. No corporation was untouchable. In the weeks that followed, criminal charges were filed against Clarissa Holt and several conspirators in the IT department, including the unknown specialist who had orchestrated the hacking. Rutherford Hayes resigned as CEO, citing health reasons, though everyone knew it was a desperate attempt at damage control. Deborah Lannister was fired and faced separate civil lawsuits from individuals who claimed she'd harassed them during travel. Meanwhile, smaller airlines scrambled to fill the vacuum left by AGA's downfall, offering new routes and inclusive policies. Elijah's name became synonymous with integrity and courage under fire. Tech forums hailed him as the entrepreneur who fought a Goliath of the travel industry and won. Conference organizers invited him to speak on corporate accountability and ethical leadership. Although he accepted some engagements, he was just as eager to return to his normal routine, running Kingston Cyber Dynamics and forging new solutions in cybersecurity. For a fleeting moment, Elijah considered whether he should have let things slide if maybe he'd overreacted. But then he remembered the blackmail notes, the humiliations, and the countless other passengers who had endured silent mistreatment. No, he decided. When large institutions thrive on unethical practices, exposing them is a moral imperative. If anything, he wished it hadn't taken such drastic measures. On a sunlit afternoon, he visited the local youth coding workshop he sponsored. He talked to aspiring kids who looked at him with shining admiration. "We must stand up for ourselves, no matter who tries to keep us down," he told them. Their wide eyes and enthusiastic nods reminded him why fighting injustice mattered. The seeds of change were taking root. If the next generation learned from these events, the future might be brighter indeed. Meanwhile, the FBI concluded its first wave of arrests. Press releases named over a dozen AGA employees, tied to a ring of corporate espionage and extortion. Some conspirators claimed they acted under pressure from higher-ups. Others insisted they never expected the scheme to spiral so out of control. The public marveled at how arrogance and prejudice had brewed into a criminal enterprise. Elijah felt a profound sense of closure. The immediate threat to his company had been neutralized. The prototypes and data remained secure, thanks to his team's quick responses. The bribery attempts, defamation, and intimidation had backfired spectacularly on AGA. People from around the world sent messages of support. Many also shared their personal travel nightmares, hoping the downfall of AGA would spark reforms across the airline industry. The next time Elijah flew out of San Francisco, he booked with a rival airline known for stellar customer service. The difference was striking: polite greetings, efficient check-in, and a genuine warmth from the flight attendants. Reclining in a first-class seat, without fear of harassment, felt surreal. As the plane took off, he glanced out the window at the receding cityscape. In his mind, he replayed the harrowing experiences of that infamous AGA flight, the note telling him to stay seated and stay quiet. He smiled faintly. They had picked the wrong man to silence. Across the aisle, a passenger recognized him from the news and whispered words of gratitude. "Thank you for standing up. You've made flying safer for all of us." Elijah nodded, softly responding, "We each do our part. I just happen to be in a position to fight." He gazed at the clouds below, feeling an almost cathartic release. Sometimes change demanded conflict. Sometimes you had to tear down the rotten pillars to build something fairer and stronger. In the months after AGA's downfall, several new federal regulations were proposed to protect airline passengers from discrimination. Experts credited Elijah's case with igniting the conversation. Debates raged about how to balance security needs with passenger rights. Whistleblower protections were strengthened, ensuring employees could report unethical conduct without fear of retaliation. Kingston Cyber Dynamics thrived under the renewed spotlight, securing lucrative government contracts for advanced encryption solutions. Ironically, the more the conspirators had tried to bring Elijah down, the higher his standing rose in the tech world. He initiated a scholarship program for underrepresented youths, dreaming of careers in cybersecurity, naming it after his late mother, who always taught him to fight for what was right. Eventually, the day came when the Department of Transportation delivered its final verdict. AGA's license to operate was permanently revoked unless it underwent a top-to-bottom restructuring. Investors had already fled. The brand was tarnished beyond repair. The airline declared bankruptcy, and its remaining viable assets were auctioned off. News outlets deemed it one of the fastest corporate collapses in aviation history. While some lamented the loss of an iconic airline brand, many saw it as a cautionary tale, a testament to how unchecked prejudice and hubris could destroy even the mightiest institutions. Elijah was invited on major TV networks to speak about corporate responsibility. He often redirected praise to his team, the investigators, and everyone who had the courage to share their stories. "I just refused to stay silent," he said humbly on one broadcast. "The real heroes are those who came forward with the truth." On a crisp morning in San Francisco, Elijah stood by the waterfront, gazing at the Golden Gate Bridge. The city was alive with possibility. He reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a humiliating denial of boarding a first-class seat, a trivial spark that ignited an inferno exposing widespread corruption. Though he couldn't predict the future, he felt certain that the airline industry, and perhaps corporate culture at large, would tread more carefully in matters of ethics and equality. A warm breeze carried the faint sound of seagulls. Elijah closed his eyes, taking in a deep breath of sea air. He had survived a vortex of lies and threats, but he emerged stronger and more resolute. He remembered the note that said, "We're watching you. Let them watch." He thought, the era of silent suffering was over. Thank you for joining us on this unforgettable journey, where one act of discrimination set off a chain of revelations that shook an entire industry. We hope you felt the rush of suspense, the sting of betrayal, and the triumph of justice echoing through each twist of this story. May it serve as a reminder that even the mightiest corporations are not immune to consequences when prejudice and corruption run rampant. If this tale resonated with you, please support our channel by liking this video, sharing it with friends, and subscribing for more captivating narratives. Your engagement fuels our passion to uncover stories of courage, redemption, and hard-earned victory. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay true to your convictions, and remember, sometimes the smallest spark can illuminate the darkest corners of power.